Hi, my name is Andy. I'm a chaotic reader and I've done the mid-year book freakout tag 2 times now. This is the third. And I feel like this year I had a surprisingly hard time choosing a book for each category as the best, simply because a lot of the books I read this year so far were okay, but not necessarily outstanding. Let me grab my phone. Looking at my Storygraph tracking, so far in almost 6 months, because I'm filming this on the 21st of June, I've read 19 books, currently reading Babel, and I'm keeping one of them paused for later times. At the same time, I DNF'd only 2 books, which for me is actually a good ratio. I made it my personal goal to only start books that really interest me this year and not fall for this short-lived, basically hype on social media. So far so good. Oh my god, my high school English teacher used to say this phrase all the time, so far so good. Anyway, my top 2 most read genres didn't really change. It is still fantasy first place and romance second, but this time I have literary and historical fiction in third place. This was intentional. I had a couple books on my TBR that I kept putting off for even 2 years now. Like you can see it behind me, Below the Plant, The Invisible Life of Eddie LaRue, and for example also If We Were Villains. And finally this year I picked them up, so these make up most of this category. Most read authors, this is interesting, are Brandon Sanderson and Tess-Sonia Odette, so far both with 2 books. Both are authors that I finally got into this year. I even made a dedicated vlog about reading Brandon Sanderson for the first time, and I still plan to read a lot more from both of them actually. Okay, let's look at the book freakout text questions. I've got the notes on my phone. Starting on a very high note with the best book of the year so far. There was only one book I rated 5 stars, so this was easy, and it was Blood Over Brighthaven. This book made me go through all kinds of emotions. My jaw was on the floor with the first scene. We started super strong, right in the middle of the action, and it just totally blew my mind. I remember finishing the chapter and needing to put it down because it hit hard and I wasn't sure that I had the emotional and mental capacity to continue right away. And that was just the beginning. After that, I experienced rage, helplessness when reading some of the plot points, shame at times too, and the ending still managed to blow my mind, maybe just as much as the beginning. Did I tell you what it is about? No? Okay. We have this high magistry as the backdrop, where all the high mages do their research to further the unique magic system, which is a little bit like coding spells. Super interesting actually. And the high mages are all men, but for the first time in the city's history, Siona, a super talented woman, makes high mage, and she has all of these great ambitions on how to build a name and a legacy for herself. I want to emphasize it. She is a deeply flawed main character, and she gets confronted with all of the flaws in her thinking and in her beliefs, especially about the power imbalances in society, which parallel obviously a lot of real life issues as well. There is a plot twist in it, and after that I genuinely had no idea where the ending was going because it was just so insane. Easily the best book of the year so far, maybe even the whole year, and definitely one which will stay with me for a long time, both in terms of characters but also the plot points. Next up we have best sequel I've read so far in 2025. This was hard because, strictly speaking, the only sequel I've read where we follow the same main characters was Onyx Storm. Well, I guess My Feral Romance from Tessania Odette can be considered a sequel, even though it's about the side characters of the first book. This one I really enjoyed. I got into the series because I was craving a silly little fae romance story with good banter but no dramatic word-ending plotlines, and let me tell you, the author delivered exactly what I was looking for. I finished the first book in like 3 days, which is super rare for me as I have a full-time job, so I usually only read in the afternoon and evenings, like after work. And then I jumped into the second book and finished it also in like 4 days or so, and already added the third book and some other fae romances from the same author to my TBR. The series that I'm talking about is titled Fae Flings and Corset Strings, and that tells you everything you need to know. There is plenty of flirting, funny situations, sweet romance with actually believable internal and sometimes external conflicts, all wrapped up in a fictional Victorian era setting where humans and fae mingle. The series is criminally underrated if you ask me. The first book plays on the enemies to lovers storyline between two rival writers who are both competing for the same publishing contract, and in the second book we get the friends to lovers dynamic where the previous side characters Monty and Daphne enter into an agreement. He will find her a husband as a matchmaker and she will get to paint him as her model since she's an illustrator. Honestly, usually I'm not the biggest fan of friends to lovers, but this was so well done. Like, the spark was there already in the first book and not just suddenly, oh yeah, by the way, we are attracted to each other. Plus, I love an oblivious woman with a completely smitten man kind of pairing, especially when we also get his point of view. Chef's kiss. This was so much fun. I plan to read the third book when it comes out, about the side characters of the second book, and as I mentioned, also other cozy, funny fae romances from the author Tessania Odette. Talking about books that are coming out, next category is a new release I haven't read yet, but I want to. Did The Knight and the Moth come out already? I'm actually not sure. I think it will be released in July here in Austria, but I will go with that one. And I have to confess, I loved One Dark Window and here's Two Twisted Crowns on my little like favorites shelf. And so far I've heard mixed reviews of The Knight and the Moth, so I'm actually scared that it might not live up to my expectations. I kind of got the ick when the blurb described it as the next big romantasy phenomenon. Like, chill, let the readers be the judge of that, okay? But on paper, this sounds exactly like the stories I enjoy. We have a nun as our main character who can see the future, and a mysterious knight who is rude but also devilishly handsome, according to the blurb, and they team up to solve a mystery when her fellow sisters start vanishing from the cathedral. And I especially love the last line of the blurb, like I copied it in my notes. It goes, "Only the gods have the answers she's seeking, and as much as she'd rather avoid Roderick's dark eyes and sharp tongue, only a heretic can defeat a god." Are you kidding me? I need to read this right now. Based on the author's previous work, I'm expecting super atmospheric, gothic world building, and plenty of tension and yearning. Atmospheric world building and yearning are both key ingredients for me for a 5-star book, and I'm expecting Rebecca Ross's new work, Wild Reverence, to become a favorite of mine too. I talked about it in a previous video. It's just simply one of the most anticipated releases for the second half of the year for me personally. It's supposed to be a prequel to Divine Rivals and Ruthless Vows, set in the time before Iris and Roman's story, and our main character this time is a young goddess. I loved how Rebecca Ross crafted this whole mythology with the war between gods, so I'm excited to learn more of what happened before, especially as there's going to be a romance subplot between the goddess Matilda and a mortal boy. Immediately what comes to my mind is Circe, where we also got an exploration of what it means for an immortal to love and know that the other person will grow old and die. So that makes me curious of how that will be handled here and if it will be part of the central conflict. I believe it will be released in September, so September cannot come soon enough. Shifting the tone to the biggest disappointment of the year so far. I haven't really read super disappointing books. Well, that's not true. The ones that were disappointing, I DNF'd, like Silver Elite. I DNF'd it at like 60% because I couldn't stand how nonsense the whole book was. I literally wrote this in my notes. The dystopian world building made zero sense. The romance subplot had zero spark. The side characters, apart from like two, were all forgettable. No interest to see where this is going. And I still stand by this as my opinion on Silver Elite. It wasn't super disappointing, but a book that I expected to like a lot more was Enchantra, the second part of the Wicked Games series that had Phantasma as the first book. Phantasma I rated 4 stars. I enjoyed the trials, the gothic mansion vibes, the chemistry between the leads, but Enchantra was only a 3-star read for me. It wasn't bad, but it just like didn't hit the same points that Phantasma hit before. I wrote it in my notes. The hunting games were kinda boring, the romance subplot was kinda boring, the plot twist was kinda boring, a bit of a letdown in general. I remember I had this pet peeve at the beginning when we were introduced to the characters, that their main character traits were described to us, and I felt like I want to discover that they are a certain way as a person through their words or their actions in like multiple scenes over the plot, and not just have them described a certain way and now I as a reader have to accept that they are that kind of a person with actual like no evidence. You know what I mean? Am I the only one with a pet peeve like this? Anyway, yeah, overall I expected a lot more from Enchantra. On the other hand, the biggest surprise read of the year so far for me was Nettle and Bone from T. Kingfisher. This was my first book from the author, and I knew beforehand that people praise the sarcastic commentary, the usual fairy tale tropes with new dark twists, but I was surprised how much fun this book was and how fast I got through it. At the core of it, this book is about a princess who sets out to rescue her older sister from an unhappy marriage. This is quite basic so far, right? Okay, next layer on top of it. She is a 30-year-old nun. She enlists the help of a dust wife who is this witch, basically, who can talk to the dead and has a demon chicken, a godmother named Agnes, who might not be super good at her job of being a godmother, but she's super skilled in other things, and a former knight who is a huge asset to the quest, especially when he chops firewood shirtless. Oh yeah, and there is a dog made out of bones at her side. What? This was so much fun and surprisingly relatable in some of the commentary, especially about how women's actions and decisions are perceived in society. Definitely recommend it, and I already have other T. Kingfisher books on my TBR like Sword Heart and Paladin's Grace, which I hope will be just as enjoyable to read. There are a bunch of authors that I read for the first time this year so I'm counting them in this favorite new author category, even though they are not new authors, but they are new to me. Like I said, T. Kingfisher, Brandon Sanderson. I've also read Legendborn from Tracy Dion, which I really liked. Obviously, ML Wong should make this list with Blood Over Brighthaven, but in my heart of hearts, my new favorite author is Tessonia Odette. The fact that I have read 2 of her books and then thought to myself, probably she doesn't have many more, or they might be different. And then I went on to Storygraph and saw that she has a bunch of other loosely interconnected fae romance standalones. That moment felt like a personal victory, no joke. I feel like authors get underappreciated when they write funny, quirky characters and stories, but to me as a reader, it's very impressive when they maintain it and they don't tip into cringe or the characters don't become flat as the story goes on. So here's my recommendation to check out A Rivalry of Hearts and My Feral Romance, especially if you like your fae romances to feature men who are maybe slow to warm, but they have a heart of gold, unshakable loyalty, and witty banter with actual emotional depth and vulnerability. I cannot wait to read more from her. I will keep you updated. Next category, for newest fictional crush, I have to stay with My Feral Romance because it's Monty Phillips. I'm afraid his charm really worked on me. I liked how he was written as a character, someone who tries to keep people at arm length, but as soon as he lets you in, even as a friend, he is fiercely loyal and tries his best to help. And I'm a sucker for his emotional healing arc and how he slowly learns to accept love. Ugh. I think he will be in the top 3 of my fictional crushes of the year, for sure. As for the newest favorite character, I was thinking back on all the main characters I've read this year, and if I have to be honest, none of them made this list as my favorite. There were memorable ones for sure, like for example Bree from Legendborn, or even the demon called Lessie from Where the Dark Stands Still. But actually I would say my new favorite is sort of a side character. It's the old dust wife from Nettle and Bone. Do they even mention her name in the book? I don't think so. They always just call her Dust Wife or Lady Fox. She was effortlessly funny with her sarcasm and no-nonsense attitude, but she also had the caring, emotional depth that shined through in moments with our main character Mara, or even with Agnes the godmother. She was a refreshing character to read and a nice take on the fairy tale witch tropes, so I will go with her as my new favorite character. Choosing a book that made me cry was hard because none of the books did, but a book that I expected to make me cry and it didn't was In Memoriam. Where do I start with this book? This is set a little bit before and during World War I, with our 2 main characters going from British schoolboys to the front lines, grappling with their attraction toward each other and also trying to hide it. You could tell that the author did her research. I mean, she also shares some of the details in the end about how many first-hand accounts of the war she read and how she modeled certain tragedies after things that happened in real life, and maybe that's where it went wrong for me. This felt too real, like I was watching or reading a documentary, and less like a fictional exploration of a queer love story and the unspeakable tragedy that was the war on people's lives. I wrote down, scenes were rather disjointed and not enough time was given to the reader to digest the emotions. There were little descriptive details of the characters themselves and how they feel, and I get it, like I was supposed to read between the lines, but somehow it didn't land. I mean, on the front cover it says it's a devastating love story between 2 young men that moves from the sheltered idyll of their public school to the unspeakable horrors of the Western Front. And I expected devastation, I expected tears, and don't get me wrong, there were moments where I was horrified or shocked, but I still felt like the emotional exploration was missing for me. So yeah, In Memoriam was a book I thought would make me cry, but it didn't. Let me know if you have read it and how you felt about it. I had an equally hard time choosing a book that made me happy, simply because they all did in their own ways, but being happy is usually not the primary emotion that I associated with any of them. I guess the one that came closest was A Rivalry of Hearts, the first book in the Faithlings and Corset Strings series. This book made me happy because I was kind of going into a reading slump, and it pulled me right back to the joy of reading. These smaller scale, or dare I say cozy fantasy vibes, are so hit or miss for me, but when they hit, these are usually the books I turn to when I need a reminder of why I love reading in the first place. Similar to its sequel, this book was just so much fun. It still dealt with serious topics, such as women's voices being undervalued, depictions of female ambition and autonomy, and it did it all with mutual respect serving as the foundation for the love story, which I'm always happy to read. For the most beautiful book I've bought or gotten so far, I have to go with the Chiltern edition of Wuthering Heights, which my husband got me for my birthday this April. I have a bit of a history with this book. I mentioned it in a previous video. I have been looking for it for like 2 years by now, but they didn't have it anywhere in Austria, so he ended up ordering it for me from the UK. The cover is absolutely gorgeous, and I'm planning to do a video where I reread 2 or 3 classics that I enjoyed back in high school, because Wuthering Heights was one of them, and I'm curious to see if my opinion changed now, like almost 10 years after graduating. Wait, it's 2025, which means it's actually been 10 years since I graduated in 2015. Oh wow. Okay, before I descend into existential crisis, let's move on to the last category of the mid-year book freakout tag, which is books I need to read by the end of the year. As I mentioned at the beginning, I feel like I did a good job of reading some of the books which have been on my shelves for embarrassingly long, but there are still a few that I want to get to. The Poppy War being one of them, for example, and then also The Starless Sea from Erin Morgenstern. I've read The Night Circus from this author and I liked it, so I have high hopes for this one. What else? The Sword of Kaigen, definitely. After reading Blood over Brighthaven, I'm in awe of Emma Wang's work, so I need to check it out. I want to read again from V.E. Schwab, and I had A Darker Shade of Magic also for more than a year now, so it's high time that I get to it. And of course, there are some new releases I'm excited about, but knowing myself, I won't read them immediately when they come out, especially if they get released later here in Austria. This was fun. Let me know what books you have on top of your TBR, and if you want to answer the book freakout text questions as a comment, let's start a conversation. Hope you enjoyed me rambling about the books I read so far this year. See you in my next video. Until then, take care. Bye!